Today I want to talk about why you're not making progress in your target language and some things that you can do to help you further progress if you're feeling like you're slumped down and not making progress. So I'm going to be getting real with you guys today, but before I start, I just want to say give this video a like and subscribe if you're learning a language, particularly French, and if you love French culture, because I'll be doing lots of videos in the future about that. The first thing that you might be doing that may be hindering your language learning is not tracking your progress. Now, tracking your progress is really important when it comes to language learning because it keeps you motivated and it shows you the areas you may need to improve on. Unless you do one of those like DELF exams, it's really difficult to figure out what level you're up to by yourself, and all of those online tests I feel like aren't super accurate because think about it, you have to consider speaking, listening, reading, writing, all those kinds of things. I personally find it really helpful to record myself speaking in French or another language and pick up what I'm struggling in. I actually did a video, my last video, called Speaking French for a Day, and watching that video over again, I picked up so many bits that I was struggling, which I didn't actually think that I was struggling with before. So record yourself if you can and listen back to it. It might sound a bit weird at first because you're not used to listening to yourself speak, but trust me, you'll pick up like where you're not making the liaison, things that you're missing out, and if your pronunciation isn't too good. Another way that you can actually track your progress is if you use a flashcard app, you can find ones that like rank you on memorization. So over time, if you get the same word over and over again, and then you start getting it correct instead of incorrect, it will track that and it will tell you. Also, it really depends what areas you want to progress in. I was talking to one of my iTalki teachers and I told her, okay, I really want to be in the B levels, like intermediate. So I need to do more flashcards, I need to do more this and that. And she said, hold on, what I really need to do is focus on tenses because that's where I'm struggling. And tenses and being able to express yourself in different forms, not just the present, is the main thing that will get you into intermediate from beginner. The next thing that you might be doing that will definitely slow down your progress in language learning is not being an active learner. Basically, there's a passive learning and active learning. And active learning means you're doing something with the information that you're getting. Whereas passive listening is when you're just taking in information and not really doing anything with it afterwards. So passive learning would be like listening to YouTube or an audiobook, whereas active learning would be doing grammar drills, flashcards, things like that. And active learning is significantly going to speed up your learning more than passive learning. And I know this is quite difficult because, watching a movie in your target language is going to be probably more fun than, grammar exercises. But at the end of the day, actually taking what you're learning or hearing and putting it into practice will 100% make you progress more. Definitely you can do passive learning and active learning at the same time. But I just want to say, make sure you're not only doing passive learning. You can't just be, watching a Netflix series in your target language. You really should be doing drills and taking what you're learning and implementing it so that it really sticks in your memory. The next thing you might be doing is underestimating how difficult the language actually is. Now, I did this myself because, when people are learning a Latin language like French or Spanish or Italian, there's a lot of words that share the same in English, whereas if you're learning, say, Japanese or Chinese, you have to learn the characters as well. So I always told myself, it's not Japanese, it's just French, it'll be so easy because there's so many of the same words. But I was wrong because yes, there are a lot of the same words, but you have to learn if it's masculine or feminine, you have to know to do the liaison. Like, there's so many other things that aren't just, okay, it's the same word. And in fact, there's actually some words that are faux amis, which is like false friends, such as actuellement. It sounds like actually, but it doesn't mean actually, it means currently. And this is one that tricks both French and English people all the time. It's really funny. Definitely don't underestimate how difficult the language is and compare it to other languages because it's your own language learning journey. The next thing that you might not be doing, which will definitely impact you further along the road, is not learning all of the different parts of the language, whether that be speaking, writing, listening. And this has actually personally affected me because I haven't practiced handwriting, barely at all. And in the future, I know that I want to get a job in French. So now I'm an A2 in speaking, or I can understand a lot and comprehend a lot, but for the life of me, I can't write because of all those silent letters, and I haven't practice it. So now I'm having to go back and retrace my steps and feeling like an absolute beginner, even though I'm not a beginner, because I didn't cover that aspect of the language. So if you're feeling like you're not making progress, maybe it's because, in a few areas you need to refocus, and don't compare yourself to just one area. Make sure that you're covering everything so that you don't, find yourself down the track really struggling in one area, feeling really down about yourself, feeling like you're not making progress because you kind of left that area behind. Also, another thing, if you're self-taught like me, don't skip over bits you don't want to do. That's exactly what I did with numbers. I was like, okay, I don't need this, I just need 1 to 20 and I'll be fine. And then I started doing lessons with, 1937, and I was so stuck because I put it off. So really don't put off those basic things like numbers. And even now I'm struggling still because of it, because in France they use 24-hour time, and in Australia we don't use that, we just use 12-hour time. So every time I have to say the time in French, I literally have to calculate it into 24-hour time in my head, then translate it into French. Yeah, it's really inefficient. Okay, the next thing that I guarantee you're not doing now, but I find it really, really useful, and I only discovered this recently, is actually spelling out the letters at the end of tense conjugations. Tenses in French are really hard, and it's probably the same with a lot of the Latin languages, and that's because a lot of the letters at the end all sound the same, but are spelt differently. So when it comes to writing them, you have to remember all the stems. But when you're speaking them, you don't necessarily have to remember the stems. I'll give you an example of what I mean with vouloir, to want in French. Je voudrais, it's the same, it sounds the same in the future and the conditional. So it's really difficult, and not only in the future and the conditional of the je form, I, it's also sounding the same in the tu and il form as well, I think. So what you need to do to remember is go je voudrais, and then say the ending is, and then you know that that's the conditional of vouloir, and then you kind of remember the stem. I hope that makes sense, and I found it really helpful, especially like myself, I struggle a lot with tenses. Everything sounds the same. It's very strange for someone coming from English for it to just be the changing of the end of the verb, but this tactic's helped me, and I hope it helps you guys as well. The next thing that I bet you're doing, which is going to hinder your progress, is not taking the time to learn one concept at a time. Now, with me personally, I tried to learn 4 tenses at once, and unsurprisingly, I struggled with it ever since. So what I should have done is just learn the future, and then fully comprehend and understand it, and then move on to the next tense. The same goes with any kind of grammar concept. Just make sure you fully understand something before moving on to the next thing. And I know it can be difficult because you just want to take in as much as possible, and you think that's the best way of learning the language. But if you don't take the time to really try to understand that one concept, you're just going to forget it, and then it just ends up being a waste of time anyway, because you'll go back for the 5th time, briefly going over it, forgetting it, and then that cycle kind of repeats. For example, with me, the amount of times I've gone back to look at cela, c'est, cette, celui, all of those, just because I didn't take the time to properly learn them. So yeah, I highly suggest just focus on one thing at a time, make sure you understand it, and then move on to the next thing. The next thing is not using the right tools and not dedicating enough time a day to language learning. And yes, I'm looking at you people only spending 10 minutes a day on Duolingo. I have made a video about the tools that I use, but really at the end of the day, just use things and tools that make you happy and make you motivated to keep learning the language. There's no point in, finding a language learning app like Babbel, you hate it, but you force yourself to do it, and then you end up just throwing it out, throwing your language out as well, instead of just, doing something you like. Even though, I was saying earlier, passive listening isn't as effective, if watching YouTube videos in the other language or doing something more relaxed is what's going to keep you, motivated, then just do that. Because any learning at the end of the day is good learning. If you're serious, dedicate an hour a day. Otherwise, at least half an hour a day, and make sure you're using tools that are really good. Look at reviews actually, just look at some reviews of some language learning apps, and I'm sure you'll find something great. Most importantly, just don't give up. Remind yourself why you started learning the language in the first place, and try to keep yourself motivated to continue on. Even if you haven't touched the language in 1 month, 2 months, it's fine. Just find something to motivate you to keep going, and I'm sure you'll make it. I've got a little bonus tip for you guys. Not really sure if it's a tip, but I'll give it to you guys anyway. But that is, don't question grammar too much. When I was first learning French, I was always asking like, why is it like that? Doesn't make sense. It's not like that in English. It's not gonna make sense. It's really not gonna make sense, especially in languages like French where how it sounds matters a lot. So a lot of the time they've made grammar exceptions just to make it sound better. So just don't question it and try to just accept the fact that it's not gonna make sense, and that's okay. English, honestly, English probably is really difficult for foreign learners as well. And that brings us to the end of the video. I hope this really helps you guys. And just remember, if you feel like you're not making progress or you're not making progress fast enough, you know, any hour that you put in, you are making progress at the end of the day. It's really just an hours game. You know, you put in 100, you're 100% going to improve. Thanks for watching, and let me know if you're gonna try any of these tactics. I'm really excited to see if it helps you guys. So yeah, I'll see you in the next video.